British intellectual Noreena Hertz is standing by for her live radio broadcast. MegaHertz, London Calling. Opinions and conversations from a British point of view about Europe, America, and everything British.
This is not your father's BBC. No stiff upper lip, no keep calm and carry on, no tea and crumpets or tally-ho. It's opinions and fresh perspectives, from politics to pop culture and everything in between. It's honest, fun, raw, and unfiltered. Live from London, this is MegaHertz London Calling with your host, Noreena Hertz.
Good day, America. I'm Noreena Hertz, live from London. And this is MegaHertz, the show that brings you the sharpest minds and brightest voices from Britain and Europe. I know that you guys are having a heat wave, but we're also having a heat wave here in the UK. It's absolutely baking. But temperatures aren't just rising, literally. There's heated debate over President Trump's upcoming visit to the UK, including whether he should be meeting the Queen. Kate Williams, writer, historian and royal expert, is here to tell us what could go on behind Windsor Castle's doors. Hello, Kate.
Hello.
Adil Ray is also with us. Adil is one of the UK's most feted comedians and writers, whose sitcom about a working-class Muslim family, Citizencon, is amongst the BBC's most successful shows. Welcome, Adil.
Hello.
Back in the studio too, and just back from LA, is returning guest, my husband, movie, television and theatre producer, Danny Cohen. Danny, you greenlit the first series of Citizencon when you were at the BBC, is that right?
I did indeed. Adil and I go back a long way.
Yes.
I have very strong recollection of the run-through pilot episode where Adil burst into the stage with a very large beard and a much stronger accent. And it all went smoothly from there. Yes.
And we've a doctor in the house today, esteemed physician and writer James Le Fanu. James's new book, Too Many Pills, is getting huge attention in the UK. In it, he argues that doctors are overprescribing drugs and, as a result, making us sicker. Would you ever challenge your doctor's advice? I want to get into this later on in the show, so do get in touch. Tweet me on SXM Insight, share your thoughts on Facebook Live at facebook.com/Noreena Hertz, or call me toll-free from the United States on 877-974-7487. You know that stomachache you get from overeating? Well, with July 4th looming, overeating is almost inevitable. I mean, you guys do the best barbecues. Kate, are you a barbecue kind of gal?
I am definitely a barbecue kind of gal. I love a barbecue, and there's nothing more I like than sitting at my desk, writing my books, smelling the barbecues coming from all the local gardens. I love it.
Barbecues didn't used to be such a big thing in the UK, but I feel that they're growing in popularity. Adil?
I think it's all about the weather, isn't it? If we get good weather here, then everyone gets very excited about the barbecue. But can I just say, I think the barbecue isn't actually cooking the meat from fresh on the barbecue, right? I just want to clarify this, because when I do it, it gets cooked in the oven. What? First, yes, come on. Is this right?
No,
come on.
No,
it's
that's
cooked
not
in the oven, and then you shove it on the
cooking.
barbecue because it's too much of a risk. Really, it's too risky. But the Americans, they have fantastic barbecues. They have
cheating.
They have barbecues that are almost like ovens. We still have barbecues that are literally they're not great over here. They're not. We don't have the.
You don't like the disposable barbecue?
It's safe. I don't want to kill anybody.
I actually read that Americans buy almost $1 billion worth of meat in the run up to July 4th. That is a lot of hamburgers.
The Argentinians do the best barbecues. They get a whole cow, don't they? They
put theirs in the oven first.
James,
for about a week.
James, what's your fave American food?
I'm a barbecue fanatic.
Oh, are you?
And mainly because I discovered about 5 years ago this thing called a barbecue chimney. It's an extraordinary piece of simple technology, and it's a thin metal tube with a false bottom, and you stick, a few pages of Daily Telegraph under the false bottom.
It has to be the Telegraph, is it?
And then you add the curls on the top, and you light the Daily Telegraph, and within 5 minutes you've got these glowing coals, and then it is the most simple, elementary piece of technology imaginable, but it has completely transformed my barbecue experience. So there's none of that sort of, putting on the firelighters or one thing and another. And I'm stunned by it every time. And so as soon as I leave here, actually, I am getting on my bicycle, I'm cycling home, and the barbie is already set up for this evening. And
we shall see you there.
What time you expect on the menu?
Now, someone who's on the record for loving the junkiest of American foods is, of course, your president, who is heading to the UK in just over a week. And there are two things on our minds here. Just how big will the protests be? And what on earth will Trump talk about with the Queen? Kate Williams is a historian and author. Her latest novel, The House of Shadows, is coming out later this month. She's also a royal expert. Didn't you just cover Prince Harry's and Meghan Markle's wedding for CNN?
I did cover the wedding for CNN. I covered the birth of Prince Louis. We were in Windsor for a week, lockdown on Windsor. So it's been a pretty exciting royal year, but certainly for the Queen, meeting Mr. Trump is going to be a new experience.
Well, I want to come back to that shortly, but I first want to ask you, because I've got you here and you're like somebody who's really on top of all of this. Meghan's been in the job now as Duchess for a couple of months. How do you think she's doing?
I think Meghan's an incredibly successful addition to the royal family. I think she's so popular. And I think the fact is that she's not afraid to speak out. It was very significant when at the Royal Foundation meeting before the wedding, she talked about the importance of Me Too. I mean, at one point in our history, a princess talking about the Me Too movement would be unbelievable.
Off with your head.
Off with your head, yes. Henry VIII would not have had that. I mean, Henry VIII was probably a casualty of the Me Too movement in the 16th century. So chops off, and her head has not been chopped off. She is beloved, and I do think that she can really bring a lot of real fresh thinking to the royal family. And as she said, she's a feminist. She wants to fight for feminism, fight for race equality. And when you watch the royal wedding, that's not like a royal wedding that we've seen in the past. And that is because of the influence of Meghan and modernising and reflecting the fact that Britain is a multicultural country. And that's what she's reflecting as well. So I think the people love her. The people are thrilled by her. They absolutely adore her. But as royal watchers, we do think there will be a baby with not too far away. So it could be.
You heard it here first.
You heard it here first. It could be next spring or so. We'll all be standing outside the Lindo wing at the hospital just in Paddington, where Kate's had her babies. We could be all standing outside there again, waiting for a royal baby.
Oh my gosh! And do you think will that change things for her? Will she be able to be as outspoken once she's given birth to like an heir, obviously? Quite a distant heir by then to the throne.
Quite distant, obviously sixth in line to the throne. But it will be our first child of colour who's in line to the throne, and you never know. Everyone could abdicate ahead of him. Stranger things have happened in British history, and he or she could be the first monarch of colour. So we'll see. But I think that let's hope Meghan still can be outspoken, not just for herself, but also because I think the royal family needs it. Because I think that Kate plays the role of the perfect princess who never says anything, who never puts a foot wrong, and I think that Meghan can take on more of the big roles.
Okay, well,
that's the big words.
That's really encouraging, actually. And also, just to clarify, because it's quite recent that even if she gives birth to a female child, that the child will still be in line.
So that was 2013. The law was changed. So Charlotte is the first child ever not to push down the level of succession by Louis. So she retained her position in line to the throne. So when George is king, if he doesn't have children, Charlotte will be the next one, not Louis. So it took us till 2013 really to recognise that women and men had the same right to the throne after we have Her Majesty, who I think has proved that the job can be done by a lady.
For sure. Now, Meghan just did actually her first official trip on her own with the Queen. And someone else who's about to have his first visit with the Queen is, of course, President Trump, who is coming over here in just a week. In the UK, meeting the Queen is seen as a big deal. But do you think we should be rolling out the red carpet for your president? Get in touch on Twitter, on SXM Insight, on Facebook Live at facebook.com/Noreena Hertz, or call me toll-free from the United States on 877-974-7487. But we're not rolling out the full red carpet for Trump's visit. Is that right?
Well, what we're expecting is that he's going to arrive on the 12th. He'll go to the British ambassador's residence in Regent's Park in just North London.
The American
ambassador. And then from there, he'll go to Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire for a dinner. And from there, we expect him to go and see Theresa May at Chequers, her weekend residence. And we do expect him to go and see the Queen at Windsor Castle. We don't know how big his dinner's going to be, whether that's going to be a big state banquet, tiaras at the ready, or whether it's going to be something smaller. But we do expect big protests. There has been, I think we're looking at, they expect 50,000 in London, and there has been apparently a permit applied for to the Mayor of London to have a giant inflatable balloon of him as a large baby. So they have to have a permit for this because it's a health and safety hazard to this be going over the protest.
Yeah, I'm really hoping I get the permit for that.
Apparently, it has been approved. So there will be a permit for the giant balloon, huge balloon of President Trump will be flying over London. So we expect there to be a lot of protests.
Yeah, and I've been, just to give listeners a sense of this, of how big the protests are going to be. And if they're 50,000, that would be pretty significant in UK standards. If they're as high as 100,000, which some estimates are saying, that would be the same size as the number of people who came out on the streets just the other day to call for a second referendum on Brexit. So, one of the biggest domestic issues. So, just to give you a sense of how sizable it is, we actually have a caller on the line. We have Karen in New York. So I look forward to hearing from her.
You there, Karen?
Hello.
Hey, Karen, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks. So are you happy? Do you think we should be rolling out the red carpet for the Queen, for Donald Trump?
Am I happy, did you say, or do I think you should?
Are you happy that he's going to be meeting the Queen? Do you think that's a great thing?
I, to be honest, am still a little bit uncomfortable with the fact that he is representing us here in the United States, but I know that that is his official role. So I hope that he has a good experience with the Queen, and I hope that she has a good impact on helping him to understand his role and how one behaves in the world, on the world stage.
Yeah, do you think he naturally will behave in the way that one should with the Queen?
I think naturally, based on the way he's been interacting with other world leaders and important people, I would not take that for granted that he will behave appropriately.
Yeah, I think that's what we fear here. Although it's quite interesting to note that not all Brits don't want Trump to come. 11% of Brits in a recent poll said that they actually do want him to come over. These are Trump fans, 11% Trump fans. So
89% don't.
Well, no, and then there's a group of Trump pragmatists, actually. So, Danny, he's president of the most powerful country in the world. Do you think he shouldn't have been invited?
Well, in my heart, I don't want him to be, because I think he's horrific, and I think particularly the things he's been saying about migrants in recent weeks are just beyond the pale, and I think he's also breaking up old alliances that have kept Europe safe since World War II. But I think overall it's better to engage with people you don't agree with or not. I just hope the protests are large and he notices them, and it gives him a proper sense that when he says he's improving America's image around the world, he's actually doing the opposite.
And I think that the government The government are very keen, I absolutely agree. And I think the government are also quite keen to see him, because they do feel very strongly that Trump they hope and they want to show the people, as you were talking about Brexit, who are leaving the European Union, there's a chaos of who we're ever going to trade with. And people are saying, a lot of the pro-Brexiteers are saying, well, don't worry, everyone, we won't have Europe anymore, but Trump will give us a good trade deal. And what we're seeing with Mr. Trump at the moment, we've seen it with Canada. There's a possible trade war with China going on, which China
is a trade war. Well, yeah,
China's going to retaliate. And so this, I think, our government has to be realistic.
Yes,
it might be lots of handshaking and smiles, but we're not going to get anything good.
We have another
necessarily.
caller.
Why should we deserve it?
Yeah, well, we have another caller on the line. Casey, welcome.
Oh, hi. Hello.
Hi.
This is Casey, and it's great to see you and be part of your program after many years from Wharton. And
Casey, we were at school together.
we were classmates, and so.
Oh, this is turning out rather nice. Should we leave you for a few minutes on weekend? You know, you got things to catch up on.
Tell me what she was like. Tell me what she was like.
No. She's married now, Casey. So watch what you say.
So it's great to be on your program here. We're protesting every single day. I actually wrote a book called My Journey with Bernie, based on the 2016 election in the United States, where we felt like Bernie would have been a better candidate to defeat Trump. And so I think that the Queen should not meet with him because of her record. You know, she's had so much honor, and you know, I would hope that she doesn't, you know, legitimize his visit. But I also hope that there's protests. I hope that people are in the streets, if he does come, really making sure that there's a message sent.
Well,
we literally had a protest this weekend where we had hundreds of groups around the country, about 1,000 protesting around the U.S.
Yes, and we've all been kind of watching these protests from afar, and I can guarantee you there will be protests when he comes. I can't guarantee the size. But Kate, I wanted to pick up, Casey, thanks for calling. I want to pick up with Kate actually on your question. Is it as simple as the Queen could just say, I don't want to meet with this guy?
No, that's the case. She is the diplomatic tool of the government, and she has had to meet people she doesn't agree with in the past. And that is her role. So it is quite difficult for her, but she has to meet with them. But she doesn't have to chat to them in a friendly way. We don't have to imagine that Mr. Trump and the Queen, if they don't get on, she has to pretend they're behind closed doors. That she'll just be polite. So she does have to meet with him if the government asks her to do so. But it's not going to be, when we saw the China state visit, it was sort of great big meetings and lots of coverage and big photo shoots. And who can forget when the Sarkozy and Carla Bruni came? It was endless coverage. It won't be like that. It'll be much more private behind closed doors because of the protests, because of the fact that the crowds might not be cheering and screaming in happiness and taking selfies. They might be protesting. But I hope that the Duke of Edinburgh is obviously retired. I do hope that he will be escorting Melania, because I think that she deserves a kindly man to open the door for her and be gallant to her. So
and I remember in The Crown, he was quite taken by Jackie Kennedy.
Yes, he does love an American lady. So I'm sure, but there'll also be the photo shoot. I mean, that's going to be a significant moment, because we have seen Mr. Trump. He often likes to touch. We've seen him touching Mrs. May. He often likes to. When it happens with the Queen, it's seen as a scandal. Michelle Obama is allowed to put her hand on the Queen's back. I'm just demonstrating here on Adil.
Yes, just like that. Yeah.
But then,
I feel like the Queen.
When the Prime Minister, when Australia did it, he was called Lizard, and so. But that'll be a moment. I wonder where we'll see a battle of wills there. Mr. Trump is trying to put his arm around the Queen, and the Queen is trying to. Move away.
I'm sure it'll be fine, because he always takes advice from other people really well and reads his briefings. So I'm sure he won't. I'm sure he won't touch her.
James, do you think?
Well, I think we'd all like to be a fly on the wall at that meeting, and you know, as you say, the Queen is she's a very extraordinary person, and she has met many unattractive or people that we would deem to be in the past, and I'm sure she's well able to finesse it. I mean, I think that I'm not really in favour of people protesting against Trump coming here. I mean, he represents, his post represents, he is representative of, the great bastion that has defended the West for the last, 50, 60 years against, the evil empire. And we should respect and recognise that, irrespective of what we feel about him and his personality and so on. And I think it's dare I say it? Bad manners.
It's not very British.
It's not very British, no. And
I'd say it's very British to be able to say how you feel. I think if you oppose somebody, you should be able to protest in a peaceful way. I mean, half of America are against Trump, and we can see what's going on there. So I think, Britain have got every right to voice their opinion too, I think.
And we do see protests for other state visits. They're usually smaller, but we have seen them for a lot of state visits. We've seen China was...
True. True.
Yeah, and a lot is said about this special relationship, and and that relation. We're all part of that special relationship, so I think we've all got every right to protest. I just hope that actually, his visit isn't about what he says to the Queen. It is about the protests. It is about what's it's important that the world can see that even a country like Britain's involved in a special relationship. That there's a lot of people here who are opposed to his views and his beliefs, and we feel like we've been let down. And I think the world needs to see that, and America needs to see that.
I mean, the question is whether we even do have a special relationship at all, whether we have even had one since Suez in '65. Are we deluding ourselves? Because when you read other newspapers, a lot of newspapers will say in Brazil they'll say they have a special relationship with everyone's
Australia.
got one. Australia. Are we just saying he's our boyfriend, no one else's, when actually he's got lots of ladies?
To be fair, there have been one or two very important historical moments. Thatcher's relationship with Reagan, for example, and
although she felt he didn't do enough for the Falklands, she really did.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but there's no doubt in those crucial years in the mid 1980s.
Yeah, when we had a common enemy, I think when we had there was the Cold War, there was the Soviet Union, we did have a common enemy. Thatcher and Reagan united, very joined in terms of economic policies, of course, as well, both promulgating a particular form of capitalism, and there was a closeness. And now I think, there is a legitimate question to ask, who actually does Trump want to have a special relationship with? He's, of course, going off to meet with Vladimir Putin just after. Would he? We don't know where his loyalties really lie.
And he is. Of course, he is. He's a bit of a loose cannon, I think.
I think we might agree that. Can I just go back to his meeting with the Queen? Because when President Obama came and when President George W came, they both slept over at the palace, but no one's inviting Trump to sleep over. Is that
at
right?
Windsor Castle? We don't know at the moment. We don't know. They tend to sleep over because of security concerns. You can't pop into the local hotel in Windsor, so they do tend to sleep over. Okay. But he may sleep at Blenheim, and that
no one wants to see him in his pajamas. No one wants that.
And what is the protocol? I want to get a sense of you go into the room, you're introduced to the Queen. If it's a banquet, will he be sitting next to the Queen? How does it normally work?
He may be sitting next to the Queen if it's a banquet. Usually that type of banquet will invite a lot of significant people from the country to the banquet. So a lot of significant Americans who live in this country would expect normally to be invited to that banquet. Whether or not they'll all choose to come, that's the question. It's not the same as, say, the Irish state banquet at Windsor Castle, which was a huge moment of celebration when Michael Higgins said, we're friends, we've had a lot of problems and troubles in the past, but now it's a unity, it's a friendship, and all the great Irish, the great and the good from who lived in Ireland, who lived in Britain were there. That may not be the same. We may find that some people don't wish to come, so it may not be as huge state banquet because the guests won't come as well. But certainly I think they're going to try and make it reasonably low key, simply because that's going to only add to the protests and going to fuel the protests, and it's more is going to be behind closed doors than we would normally expect.
And can the Queen raise issues with Trump, like the separating of children from their parents at the border?
It's not her job is to advise and to warn the British politicians, the Prime Minister, but the Queen does ask questions of people who are not the British Prime Ministers. What she normally do, she'll catch it in terms of a question. She'll ask, and in that way she asks them to justify their opinions, and so we might very well expect to see her asking him some tough questions. She always does.
Will Ivanka be coming as well? Because maybe we should separate Ivanka from Donald when they arrive. Do them both a favour.
Where are you going to take her?
Away from Trump.
Let's take it to Birmingham.
Oh my gosh, she'll like it. Well, we'll pass that offer through our network's channels. Yeah. I'm sure. Kate Williams, thank you.
And I do think one thing that Melania will behave perfectly. That's one thing we can expect.
As long as she wears the right jacket. Yes. Now, Kate Williams, thank you so much. Your latest novel, The House of Shadows, is out later this month. I've read your other novels, and so I absolutely cannot wait. This is on my summer reading list. Now, Adil.
Yes, hello.
You were actually honoured by the Queen, weren't you? You got what we call here an OBE, which is an Officer of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire.
Yes.
Wow, from the Queen.
I still think it's a mistake, and I sort of think they're going to phone up any time now and say, sorry, we meant to give it to Art Malik. So can we have it back? But,
actually, that's why we invited you on today.
You thought I was Art Malik.
We thought you were. No, we thought we'd tell you live.
Oh, I'll tell you. Sorry.
It's not yours.
It's not yours.
Honestly, it's honestly true. I don't think that's going to happen. But,
well, it is yours, and it's a
thanks.
huge honour here. And one of the reasons you were honoured was because of the huge success over here of Citizencon, which is the Muslim family sitcom which you both star in and wrote. The show pulls in huge audiences in the UK, over 4 million people, and is now in its 5th series. Can you explain the show to anyone who hasn't seen it?
Yeah, well, the intention of the show really was, for me, just from the starting point, just to do comedy. Always loved comedy, loved sitcom, and sitcom has this great ability of sort of universalizing communities as well. So there's me, and it was post 9/11 for me, actually, when I had a thought about it. 9/11, it changed all of our lives, and as a Muslim, it certainly did. And you realise, well, at some point, there's going to have to be stories to be told. And I suddenly realised, well, I can combine my passion and desire to do comedy by making it really close to home. And I thought, well, there's no better way than doing sitcom. I was brought up watching Cheers with my mum.
Love Cheers. We've been watching it recently again.
And I think that is still the #1 sitcom of all time. And I remember watching Cheers and relating, to some of the characters. So in a way, with the whole purpose of Citizencon, it's a Muslim family living in inner city Birmingham, which is one of the second city here in the country in the
What would
in
be
the
the
UK.
American equivalent?
I don't know. It'd probably be
Chicago?
It'd be like in Chicago. My family's. I've got some family live in Chicago. They live in Naperville, but they tell me of a place called Devon in Chicago, which is very, very multicultural. You've got lots of Pakistanis, Hindus, Indians, people from all different communities. And I suppose Birmingham is very much like that because of the size of Birmingham. It's not as big as London, so it feels even more diverse. So, you've got Mr. Khan, who's sort of the leader of this sort of family, of the household, or at least he thinks he is, but he's surrounded by 3 fiercely independent women, his 2 daughters and his wife, and he goes on, like most sitcoms do, in sort of when you think of Married with Children in America or Only Fools and Horses, which is our big comedy here in the UK, that your lead characters go on this journey. They're almost quite monstrous at the start. They're, but by the end of the 30 minutes, they really should have been, gone on some sort of message to realize that in most family sitcoms, it's families matter more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love the show, and I find it laugh out loud funny. James, they say that laughter is the best medicine. Is there any truth in that?
I'm not sure. Is it? Laughter can be bad for you, of course.
Can it?
If you laugh too much, you can rupture a lung or
Well, you're thinking of every eventuality there.
Oh my goodness! Oh dear, Adil, have you got insurance?
No, I don't know. I'll leave that to people like that in the corner, the producers with that kind of stuff. That's up to you.
That's terrifying.
But it is.
I should put a warning on my DVD.
It is. It's quite tricky territory though that you're in, isn't it? Because it's religion and humour.
Yeah, it is, and I think that's probably why it's sort of very rarely been done. And there was a show in Canada called Little Mosque on the Prairie. I think that started a bit before we did, but we were perhaps the first show on such a network the size of the BBC, and thanks to Danny Cohen over there who commissioned it. But I think that's probably the reason why, because you're dealing with a very sensitive subject. But it takes somebody to do it for the first time. You've just got to do it. And it's an interesting journey we went on with the show. In the first series, there were a number of complaints, hundreds of complaints. I mean, it was the time when, nowadays with complaints, people cut and paste a complaint on Facebook and send it in. And you don't know how much people really had conviction for their complaints.
What were they complaining about?
They were complaining, thought that we were mocking the faith, that it was... And I think generally they felt that we were part of some wider conspiracy at the BBC to bring down the faith and ridicule Muslims in this country. And there was a lot of that going on. But what I've now found, 5 series down the line, I literally do get into taxis or go to restaurants and people will stop me. And I had this lovely tweet from this girl only a few days ago saying that I need to apologise to you, because I was very critical of Citizencon, but I came home today and saw my mum watching it, and she's not laughed like that in lots, and she's been through a lot and not laughed like that in years. And I think what happened is a lot of Muslims perhaps hadn't watched a lot of British comedy, hadn't watched a lot of sitcom, hadn't realised what it is trying to do just to make people laugh. And I think they've probably watched it because other family members are watching it, and I realised actually it's just funny. And they've gone to work and they've realised some of their co-workers are talking about it. They've gone to school, some of their friends are talking about it. You know, and I think that's a good thing. And finally, we're talking about not Muslims being terrorists, not Muslims being fundamentalists, Muslims just being funny characters or funny dads on the telly, and that's got to be a good thing, I think.
There have been huge changes, of course, in the political landscape since you first broadcast here in 2012. I mean, in terms of a growing intolerance, a rise in anti-Muslim sentiment, does that affect your storylines and what you write? I think it maybe does in a way. It's sort of I suppose, like for me, it all started because of 9/11. You realise whenever you have these issues in society, you know, as a storyteller, you can step up and you can, you know, what we desperately need in these situations is to tell stories. You know, the issue that we have at Citizencon is that we're still one of the very few Muslim sitcoms or comedies or fictional shows on telly, and we just need more and more. You know, you desperately, in times like this, you desperately need, you know, diversity within Muslim stories too. Mine is just my story in my head with my co-writers and team, but there'll be another Muslim writer somewhere else who's got a completely different perspective, and we need to see those as well. Have you had meetings in the US about potentially doing this in America? I
have. I did go out to the US. This is just before Trump got in, and it was a few years ago, and there was real excitement. You know, that typical thing of going to some of these American network, you know, meetings with the ABC and CBS. Go, oh my God, it's amazing! Yeah, you know, and you think, come on, well, we're going to hear from them tomorrow. Surely this is a game changer. And actually, we did have some real positive feedback. And then something very strange happened. And I know it wasn't just me. I know other Muslim writers in America suffered this, that suddenly nothing happened. Because when Trump went in, I think there was a feeling that actually in America, what they don't now need is that sort of liberal Muslim depiction on TV. They needed to represent some of those Trump voters. And I think that's why things like Roseanne, you know, got recommissioned, you know, and it's sort of really disappointing that, well, surely that was the time. I'm kind of hoping now the fallout with what's happened with the Roseanne show is that perhaps people, not just myself, I know Reza in America is trying desperately to do a Muslim sitcom, that somebody somewhere gets their chance. I mean, it's ridiculous that there isn't one on just yet, and you just hope that either ABC or somebody will announce one very soon.
Okay, well, after the break, I want to keep talking to you, Adil, and I want to focus on differences between US and UK humour. And I want to hear from you too. Are you a fan of British comedy? If so, which of our shows makes you laugh? Let me know on Twitter, on SXM Insight, on Facebook Live at facebook.com/Noreena Hertz, or call me toll-free from the US on 877-974-7487.
Very good.
Okay, we have a 3-minute break. Right. We have a 3-minute break.
I was like, what's going on? I can't hear the break. So
we have a 3-minute break, but remember that we're still on Facebook Live, so don't
can
say...
someone take up...
Oh, they can still hear us on Facebook Live?
Yes.
Oh, hello, Facebook Live. Hi. Oh.
When we're doing our talking, would you mind taking your
photo? Oh, great idea.
And then I could...
Yes,
great idea. Is that an action shot?
Yes,
wow.
I haven't even got
my phone's in my handbag, but
or Lizzie can send them to us.
Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Great idea. I like the idea of an action shot. I'm a bit worried that we can really hurt ourselves from...
Are we? I mean, is there no equivalent in the United States?
No, not right now. There isn't. They've had a show called Blackish, which is about an Afro-Caribbean community, and a Vietnamese family called Fresh Off the Boat, but they haven't yet done.
Came in whilst we're actually. Is that what you meant?
Yes, while we're on air.
Yes.
Would you? I don't know if it will work through the window or not. I don't know to show all the stuff.
Amazing, really. I know. You just think we were the first.
It's through the window.
You know,
does it work through the window?
I think it took somebody like, I'm saying it because it's easy, but it took someone like you and the BBC, you know, to make that happen. A lot of broadcasters that wouldn't do it.
It'd be interesting to know whether or not your type of humour would convert.
Yeah, well, I think that's a fair point. I mean, we're very much in that British genre, but it doesn't mean you can't have the US version of it. You know.
Also, those kind of studio sitcoms are more popular in America than here. So that style of comedy is still immensely popular in this country.
We might come back to this. So as long as you're happy to say it again.
In this country, I mean, we talked about this time, didn't we? That's kind of studio sitcom. Some people see it as old-fashioned, actually it's just immensely popular and mainstream, and most people like it. But in America, it's not like that. The most popular comedies, Big Bang Theory, all of those, they're studio sitcoms.
People on a sofa.
Yeah, there's a lot of it. So that kind of style of it.
And I think also that the whole Muslim family structure really lends itself to, because you've got lots of closer families, aunts and uncles, and more, sometimes more children. So you have a bigger range of characters that you can bring in.
Exactly, and also there's
comedy with one child doesn't really work.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, we should talk about this. There's research in America as well.
1 minute. So let's come to that.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Forgive me for interrupting. Just want to confirm. Do you want me to start the music at the end of the show?
Yes.
With a minute to go.
With
or
a
30
minute.
Seconds
With
to
a
go?
minute to go, please.
You got it. Perfect.
Thank you. Thanks.
Didn't want to throw you by doing the wrong thing.
Oh, thank you. That would have been really confusing. Thank you. Yeah, lots to talk about on this American British thing.
Has Queen still got?
We should talk about the film then. So
there's a doggy left. All the corgis have gone. In
30 seconds. 20 seconds.
Trump could end up kicking the corgi or something.
Stepping on it
by mistake.
What? Trump could end up kicking
the
corgi?
The corgi always comes in first.
Yes, and they do bite.
And they bite.
They
go scurry around the table at feet.
They're tough.
They don't bite, do they?
They do.
10 seconds.
10 seconds.
Yeah.
They knock Paul Burrell down the stairs.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go for my night.
Yeah.
Live from London, you're listening to MegaHertz London Calling with your host, Noreena Hertz, on Sirius XM Insight 121.
This is MegaHertz London Calling, and I'm Noreena Hertz, live from London with royal historian Kate Williams, Dr. James Le Fanu, movie producer Danny Cohen, and comedian Adil Ray. And we're talking about Adil Ray's brilliant sitcom Citizencon and what makes us laugh. Danny, we don't always have the same. God, you look like you were just not focusing on me.
No, I'm here now.
Okay. We don't always have the same taste in comedy.
No, I think that's very true. I find it very hard to get you to watch the comedies I like. My favourite is Big Bang Theory, which I really try and explain over and over again why it's so good. But there's just absolutely no interest.
You don't like it?
There's no interest.
I like it, but I like it once. I like it twice. But you can watch show after show after show. Yeah. Now we've got a caller on the line. We've got Bob from Texas on the line. Bob.
Hi.
Hey, Bob. Welcome to MegaHertz. Are you a British comedy fan?
I'm not opposed. I don't like a lot of people, but I do like the show Peeps show.
Oh
yeah, great show.
Very funny.
That is very funny. What is it about that show that you like, Bob?
I like the filming perspective. It's unique. I don't think it's the only show that does that I know of, but it is unique, and their humor works really well together. It reminds me of the New Zealand duo, who I can't remember at the moment.
Well, David Mitchell and Robert Webb.
The Flight of the Conchords. But yeah, but that's not British. So I just wanted to comment that Peeps show really entertains me, and I appreciate the British for that.
It's great Peep show. What you talked about there, it's very direct. I mean, if people haven't watched it, it's sort of the two main characters played by David Mitchell and Robert Webb. They literally stare down the barrel, down the camera at you, and they will say their most inner feelings, their most personal thoughts. And it is quite direct, and it's very, very effective in that way. We've only ever seen that done in the past, really, in sort of studio sitcom. We had a show here many years ago with Frankie Howard. He would, he'd speak down the barrel, and Mrs. Brown's Boys, they do it, and Miranda does it. But to see that in a single camera format, is it not common
in America?
It's not. I'm trying to think of examples in America where that's happened a lot. I can't think. Can you think of one, Bob, of a show in America where the comedy characters sort of speaking down the camera? I can't think of many others, really.
Not as a full show where that's a part of the narrative.
No.
Maybe, maybe there's, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but maybe snips of shows will do that. But Peep Show just takes it and runs with it really well.
Modern Family. Modern Family does that for sections.
Of course, Modern Family.
But you're right, Bob. It doesn't do it as the main narrative thrust of the show.
And it is Shakespearean, isn't it? They're doing soliloquies.
Yeah,
they're giving their views they're giving their own monologues, which I think. And also, I mean, would you say that some British comedy is a bit ruder than American comedy? Because Peep Show is quite
can be
rude.
very rude, yeah.
Ruder? Are we rude?
It doesn't hide behind the thoughts of others. They're not afraid to say what they want to say.
That's interesting, isn't it? Years ago, the big difference, I think, between US and UK, I mean, I don't think there's much in it these days, but I think years ago there was a very, very clear definition, going back to the 90s, and it was in Britain, we loved a loser, and we still do, where the US, it was always, Ted Danson looking fantastic and getting the girl, and even Friends was a little bit like that. Mostly it was everything looked very glamorous, living in these fantastic New York apartments. But that's starting to change, I think, in America more so now, that even they like a loser. And the way The Office transported over there, I think, was a real turning point. They really got into that over there.
Now, Adil, I know that you're currently developing the film version of your sitcom. Mr. Khan is coming to America.
Yes,
hopefully. So, listeners, check out Adil's Citizencon by finding it on BBC.
Well, on
America,
social media, we're updating on Facebook and
social
Twitter
media.
and all those things. Yeah.
But also keep your eyes and ears peeled. No, ears peeled. Keep your eyes peeled. Keep your eyes peeled for Citizencon's trip to the United States. I think it could be quite explosive. Now, my next guest has written about a subject close to my heart. About 12 years ago, it was when I started going out with you, Danny.
It wasn't my fault.
No, because I actually got very sick. Thank you. Yeah, I actually got very sick.
Was that after you started going out with Danny?
All right, Adil, you made the point.
No, it had nothing to do with Danny. It was actually really serious, Adil.
Okay.
I was really sick. I was in terrible pain. I lost 15 pounds in weight, and I'm skinny. I'm slender. I'm not, I couldn't afford to lose that. And it took 2 years for doctors to work out what was wrong. And once they did, it was actually easily curable, and now I'm 100% healthy. But when I look back, what really bothers me is not that so many doctors didn't know what was wrong with me, because it ended up being something incredibly rare, but it was that so many doctors I saw acted so certain that they did know what was wrong with me, prescribing pills, even recommending operations, often in a very patronizing way. And if I hadn't refused to just accept what they were saying and demanded rationales for what they were suggesting, if I hadn't been prepared to challenge them, God knows what would have happened, given that their diagnoses were so wrong. So, James Le Fanu, yes. You are a doctor, an esteemed doctor, but do you think patients tend to hold doctors in too high a regard?
I don't think so. I mean, the older generation probably defer more than they should. But I think people are sort of pretty democratic nowadays, and are quite prepared to, call the shots on their doctor, and indeed are aware of these hazards of, being overdiagnosed and overtreated with illnesses that they don't have. I think the trouble with your situation is, of course, that, doctors, some things are very rare. And the difficulty there is that doctors are somehow or other brought up to act. They like to do things, and this idea that I'm sorry, we don't know what's going on. You need another opinion. What is really going on here? This thing about going back to the beginning again and starting all over. And it's sort of encouraged, I think, in a sense, by they have so many, sophisticated methods of, diagnosing things nowadays, like CT scans and MRI scans and so on. And you do all these tests and you can't find anything wrong. And then there's the assumption, well, if we can't find what's wrong, well, perhaps there isn't anything wrong. I mean, that's another big issue. But of course, again, CT scans and MRI scans aren't infallible, and not so on. So I think it is a tricky one. There is no doubt that one of the things about medicine is that, on the whole, it's not terribly difficult. It's a pretty. It's you don't have to be. You want to be a clever guy. Go and pay a Beethoven piano concerto. I mean, that's real talent. But medicine is pretty it tends to be pretty straightforward. And the situation arises that every so often it's not straightforward, and then they get frustrated, and certainly in a situation in which, like in America, where there's a very strong, there's an insurance element to medicine, they don't want to, as it were, lose the patient to somebody else. So. And that is another thing. So they start treating them, even though they don't necessarily know what is wrong. I'm so glad to hear that they did finally resolve it.
They finally did.
Yeah.
I guess my question to you listeners is, would you ever question your doctor's advice? Do get in touch. Tweet me on SXM Insight. Share your thoughts on Facebook Live at facebook.com/Noreena Hertz, or call me toll free from the US on 877-974-7487. Actually, we've already got somebody on Facebook who's been in touch. Haider, he says, no, I wouldn't question my doctor's advice. It may antagonize her.
I think that one that is, I'm sorry to say,
do you think that's rare?
One shouldn't be mystified or overawed by doctors. They're fallible. Medicine is a risky business. Mistakes are made, and one should always be willing to challenge. And there's a particular issue at the moment. Because over the last 10 or 15 years, the doctors' prescribing habits have gone berserk. They're prescribing 3 times as many pills as they were 15 years ago. And that's an extra, in Britain, an extra 600 million prescriptions a year. And although perhaps some of them might do very good, there's no doubt every drug has side effects. The more drugs you prescribe, the greater the risk. And that has become a really serious issue now. And I am, you mentioned that.
Yeah, that's what your new book's about.
With the, it's got a punchy title, Too Many Pills, which pretty much says it all. And that there are too many pills. In Britain, for example, the prescription of these cholesterol-lowering statins has increased 20-fold in 15 years.
We're immune to antibiotics now because we take so many. Because when I was a little girl in the 80s, we took antibiotics for coughs and colds and all kinds of stuff that we really should have just taken honey and lemon and rest for. But yet, and it's in the water system, and increasingly they're saying that the antibiotic immunity is so high that they're not working anymore.
Well, that is it. I think it's not as if there isn't a precedent for this sort of problem about overprescribing. And the question is, how it came about.
How did it come about? Who's to blame?
It's a tricky one. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, it's the obvious culprit in a way. The pharmaceutical industry, the drug companies became greedy. It's always been profitable. They've always been profitable, but about 30 years ago, they wanted to be even more profitable still. And the way they said about this was, essentially the line was that the problem about making drugs for people who are ill is it's a restricted market. You can only prescribe for people who are ill. Well, what you really want to do is to prescribe for people who are healthy as well. And so over the last, because that is a much bigger market. And there's a man who ran a drug company called Merck, and he said, the pharmaceutical industry is very disappointing. What we want to do is to be able to sell our products to everyone, just like Wrigley's sells their chewing gum. And they did this by a very, devious way, which was essentially, we all know that it's important to take, pills to lower your blood pressure if you've got very raised blood pressure. But what they did is that they lowered the criteria, or lowered the threshold for initiating treatment from the small minority who have got very raised blood pressure to the millions and tens of millions, and whom it was only marginally raised, if raised at all. And this process has expanded in the United States, for example. 50 million people now are eligible to take one of 3 different types of, cholesterol-lowering or blood pressure-lowering drug. And that is a third of the adult population. And of course,
does this drug have side effects?
Well, all drugs have side effects, and that's the point.
Yeah.
And the real problem is that once you've, just to go on about it for a bit, the real danger is that when you're taking 4 or 5 different drugs, what it tends to do is to make you sort of they don't necessarily call you obvious side effects, but it induces a state of general decrepitude. So you become, you don't sleep well, or poor concentration, or muscular aches and pains. So you go to the doctor and says, I'm not feeling terribly well. Do I have to take all these drugs? And he says, well, what can you expect at your age? There you are, you're 75.
Take another pill.
Take some more pills.
Here's some more. Some antidepressants this time.
That's right. And of course, and the really dramatic thing is what happens, or what what started me off on, is that people wrote to tell me, I write a column for a weekly daily newspaper, and they wrote to tell me these extraordinary stories about how, for one reason or another, they'd stopped taking their pills, and this miraculous recovery. Just 2 or 3 weeks off their pills, and it was as if they were 10 or 15 years younger again. And it's a very dangerous thing, because what it means is that people are they misattribute their general illness to
malaise,
to the general process of just getting on.
Yes.
Whereas in fact it is readily curable by discontinuing or cutting down on the medication they're taking.
Danny, did you?
Yeah, I absolutely take your point about the pharmaceutical industry, and that there's obviously lots of evidence of their malfeasance and all of these things, but surely also doctors could also prescribe less. I mean, I understand they'd be under pressure from pharmaceuticals. I understand they'd be under pressure from patients, but don't they also have a degree of responsibility as the prescribers themselves?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And this is the great problem, is that it's, of course, the drug companies make the pills and they promote them and all that sort of thing, but when it comes to the crunch, the people who prescribe them are the doctors themselves. Yeah. And what has happened in Britain, and certainly in the United States as well, is that over the last 15 years, doctors have become financially incentivized to prescribe pills. And the more pills you prescribe, the greater your earnings. It's a phenomenon as pay for performance. The more people you diagnose, the more pills you prescribe, the greater your income. And it is an absolutely outrageous, scandalous, disgraceful situation.
Because it's a totally perverse incentive.
Completely perverse. It should never have been introduced. And so curiously, the thing is that you ask, 9 out of 10 doctors I've asked will say they prescribe too many pills. They acknowledge they prescribe too many pills. But to prescribe fewer is to...
I think people don't want to be sent away and told and said, just do some more exercise.
I think, that's really interesting that you say that, because Derek's been in touch, Derek from New York, on Facebook. He is a doctor with a research institute. He commissioned a study of 8,000 doctors. And what they found was that the fatter the doctor was, the fatter was their patient. And doctors who smoked had 2 times as many patients who smoked compared to non-smoking doctors. So I guess this is kind of your point. The doctor isn't going, if you've got the overweight smoker at doctor, he's not going to tell you to lose weight and go for a walk. And I think he's more likely to...
Well, I think that's very bizarre. I can't imagine there's a single American doctor left smoking.
Is no one left?
I don't know if it was just in the US, this study.
Oh, is it? Yeah,
I'm not sure where the study was.
I'm not sure about that. I think that it's a difficult situation, because there's people are bound by these sort of protocols where nowadays where you are mandated to prescribe these drugs, and you are financially rewarded for prescribing them.
People want them. People ask for them, don't they? They say, I want to be cured.
I think I completely disagree with that.
I'm not saying they're like, but I'm just saying people do it.
No. I mean, look, the situation is rather different. I mean, most people that I know certainly don't want to be taking half a dozen different pills every day, but they are coerced into taking them. Until that, unless you take these pills, you have a coronary.
I guess, not so overtly coerced, but they think that that's what they're doing to remain well. Adil, do you have any experience of this yourself?
I've got a close family relative, actually, very close family relative, and she is currently on, I know this because I was at an appointment with her recently, 26 tablets a day at the moment. And she does have a number of illnesses, one of them being Parkinson's. But we had an incident last week before, where she went to see a doctor, a GP, a general practitioner, what we call our doctors over here, and at the surgery where there are about 4 or 5 different doctors, you don't know who you're going to see each time. So she went to see this new doctor who did a few checks and thought, your blood pressure's very high, I'm going to give you this tablet. So she comes down, she goes, I'm on 27 tablets now. I'm like, really? Okay, fine. Then she goes in to see the nurse at the surgery 2 weeks later for her regular blood checks. And then the nurse sort of said, well, let's just check your blood pressure. And said, it's very low. What's going on? She said, well, I was given this tablet. Well, hang on, let me ask the doctor. Well, which doctor are you going to ask? I'll just see which one's available. So she asked another doctor and said, no, take her off those. You shouldn't be on those at all. So it made me realize, it's what you're saying. It's so subjective. It's about personality as well, isn't it? A doctor. What do they feel like they need to do? There's no right or wrong answer. My mum has sort of got to the point where I think, it is my mother. She's got to this point where she is now something, well, just accepts what the doctors say, Yeah,
I think there is a generational thing in terms of deference.
Yes, there is. And I think this is a particular issue nowadays, because it is, no doubt, it's the older, what we call oldies in this country. It's the old age group who are most vulnerable to this problem about overprescribing. And they are the ones most likely to be deferential, least likely to question it. And I really think there's an absolute moral obligation on all children, by which I mean their children, people in their 30s and 40s or 50s who see their parents taking half a dozen different pills, to accompany them to the doctor and say, do they really need to be taking these medicines, because they do can have a very, very deleterious effect on the quality of their lives. And
but of course the problem is, and I've done that, I sat with a specialist and he'll say, well, okay, I want to put her on there, but that might react with the other drug they're having there, so I need to speak to that consultant. She's seeing 4 different consultants, so it's not one person who can make a decision on all those tablets.
So James, what would you advise someone who's in this predicament, taking lots of drugs themselves? They hear what you're saying. Briefly, what would you suggest they should do as a first step?
Buy the book.
They have to realize there is a big, big issue here. And that if there's that very high instances of side effects, and they need to be acquainted with what the issues are.
Challenge their doctor.
James, thank you so much. James Le Fanu's Too Little Pills is out now. It's
too many
fascinating
pills.
Too many pills, of course, is out now. It's a fascinating and worrying insight into prescription drugs, Big-Pharma, and how we're being over-medicated. From Queen Elizabeth to King Donald, from what makes us sick to what makes us laugh. Many thanks again to all my guests, Kate Williams, Adil Ray, Danny Cohen, and James Le Fanu, and also to all of you who got in touch on social media and by phone. I really appreciate hearing from you and hope you enjoyed today's show. I'm Noreena Hertz, and this is MegaHertz London Calling.